Back to square one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Lift off.
Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the first virtual meeting of the Licensing Committee. Before we move to the formal agenda, I have a few procedural housekeeping issues to deal with. This meeting is being held under the virtual meetings regulation using Microsoft Teams. Decisions made by the committee will have the same standing and validity as it has been made at a standard meeting held at the town hall. For those members of the public watching the meeting on the YouTube link, committee members often use more than one screen during the meeting to look at committee papers, which can mean that a member is not looking directly at the camera at any given moment. We're not actually asleep, in case you're wondering. We are streaming today's meeting live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. Members, would you please ensure that your audio is muted when you are not speaking? When you wish to speak, would you please indicate by using the chat function? To avoid confusion, please do not use the hand signal functions. I will invite each of you to speak by way of a queue system. Please only use the chat function to indicate you wish to speak and for official council business. If members are joining by telephone, please would they ensure that they are muted when not speaking by pressing *6 on the telephone. You can mute by pressing *6 again. If you're leaving the meeting or returning to the meeting at any point, would you please ensure that the chairman is aware of this by using the chat function? This is paramount in respect of any disclosable pecuniary interest where you are not permitted to participate in the agenda item by law. You should immediately leave the meeting before the start of any debate on an item where you have a disclosable pecuniary interest. A democratic services officer will confirm when you have left the meeting or rejoined the meeting following determination of the agenda item. Voting. When proposing a motion, would you please indicate via the chat function that you wish to speak and wait until invited to do so. Please then clearly state that you're moving, for example, the recommendation in the report, particularly for the benefit of the public. If you're seconding a motion, please again clearly indicate that you wish to speak and wait for the chairman to call you. The vote will be taken on the basis that you have heard the full debate on the application and state clearly if your vote is for, against the motion or abstain. Please remember to turn on your microphone when you're voting and mute when you have spoken. If you have not heard the full debate on the application, please state so and your vote will be marked abstain. This will ensure that the vote is accurately recorded and will enable members of the public to properly observe the vote. At the chairman's discretion, voting on procedural matters such as confirmation of the minutes will be done in reverse order and en bloc. That is, the chairman will ask for the votes against the motion first, then abstentions, and all other voting committee members in the meeting will be taken en bloc as voting for the motion. Before I move to the agenda, are there any questions from the councillors? Can all members see and hear today's proceedings? Please ensure all mobiles are switched off. Any questions? No. Hazel, can you now please undertake the roll call of today's meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Solomon.
Present.
Councillor Cherry. Councillor Clayton. Councillor Cole. I believe Councillor Cole has joined us.
Present. Sorry, present.
Thank you. Councillor Crockford-Hawley.
Present.
Councillor Gregor. Councillor Harley. Councillor Holland.
Present.
Councillor McQuillan.
Present.
Councillor Parker. I can see Councillor Parker on screen.
Yes.
Councillor Payne.
Present.
Councillor Pepperell. Councillor Tonkin.
Present.
Councillor Willis. We have Councillor James, who is substituting for Councillor Cherry, and thank you. And the apologies I've received are Councillor Clayton, Councillor Harley, and Councillor Willis.
I'm here, Hazel. I forgot to unmute at the time. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Yes, I've noted your presence.
Thank you, Hazel. Before I move on to the formal agenda, I would like to at this stage resign as chairman of the licensing committee. I've thoroughly enjoyed the time I've been acting as chairman. I'll stay on the panel, but because of other interests, I think it's fair that at this stage I pass the chairmanship over, and at this stage would like to nominate as a replacement Robert Payne. I don't know if anybody's willing to second that.
I am.
I'll second that. I'll second that. Sorry.
And then if we I don't know, Sarah, if we have to take a formal vote on this one through Hazel, or hands up will do.
I think hands up will do. He's been nominated, Councillor Payne. Thank you very much, and you've been seconded. So I think.
So hands up for everybody that's the fours. Thank you.
Lovely. I can see all the hands up. Thank you very much.
That's fine. So I won't ask about abstains. Rather than drop Robert straight into it, Sarah, shall I carry on with the agenda item and then move into the meeting, or shall I pass straight over to Robert at this stage?
I think if you've prepared today's meeting, and as you say, not to drop Robert right in it, if you're okay to carry on for today.
Yes, certainly.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Can I just say thank you to the committee for electing me as the chairman? Thank you. And I hope all other elections today have to go to the right way as well.
No, you'll do an excellent job, I'm sure of it. So moving on then to the formal agenda. The first thing is any addresses by the public. Do we have any?
No, Chairman, there's no addresses by the public. Sorry, Sarah, no addresses from the public.
Thank you, Hazel.
We've had apologies for absence and notification of substitutes. I take it there are no substitutes today.
Yes.
Yes, there was, Chairman. Councillor James for Councillor Cherry.
Oh, thank you very much. Sorry. Right. And then I would, any declarations of pecuniary interest? That's a no then. Also then, the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of November, are we happy to pass those as accurate? Yeah, so that's fine. So those minutes are passed. There's no questions on those at all from anybody? No. Matters referred by the council exec. I don't have anything. Does anybody else? Does Sarah, do you have anything? No. And two.
No, I don't. Nothing. Thank you, Chair.
So we move straight into the mid-year report of the administration enforcement of all licensing regimes, which is a PDF document. I don't know who's going to take this one forward. Was that you, Sue? Or
yes, it's me.
Yeah. Right. In that case, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. And just on behalf of the team, thank you very much, Councillor Solomon, for all your efforts as Chair of Licensing. It's been great to work with you. I'm sure we'll carry on working with you in different guises in the future. And welcome, Councillor Payne. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to working with you as Chair as well moving forward. Report-wise, it's a little bit difficult doing it by team, so you will forgive me if I sort of read from my papers and not be looking directly at the camera at you at the moment. So we just wanted to give you a flavour really of some of the main activities that we've been doing this year. It's been a particularly strange year for everybody, us included. Pressures and difficulties, as you can imagine, as the result of the coronavirus. But we're still here and we're plodding through. So policy-wise, A few things to mention. That's probably the biggest part of it for today. As you know, we've got quite a few statutory and local policies that we use to administer the various regimes, and a couple of those are due for renewal and updating. The Licensing Act 2003 Statement of Policy, due to run out at the end of this year. In fairer times, we would have started a consultation process. We would have brought a draft before yourselves in March at the first meeting of the year. We would have looked to then go out to public consultation, and I would have hoped to have been at the point of preparing a draft for your consideration today, ready for acceptance for the end of 2020. That's not been possible with the pressures that we've had over the summer. The Home Office have recognised that and have given local authorities the guidance that as long as we make some progress in starting to look at the policy, then there isn't a problem with us actually moving that forwards by 6 months or so just to get that accommodated within the municipal calendar. So what I would propose, if it's acceptable to the committee, is that I will continue to look at the policy at the moment. I will send a courtesy copy around after the meeting of the existing policy, just so that you can perhaps have a look through, start to have some ideas of yourselves if there's anything that you think needs updating, might need looking at. There's been a few suggestions so far. Cumulative impact area is one that particularly the Institute of Licensing and the Home Office are asking us to review a little bit more regularly than was the case previously. So that one, I am aware that we haven't probably updated that for some time in the last revisions of the policy. So that might be something that we want to look at. It served its purpose brilliantly in that at the time when we were experiencing difficulties, particularly in Western Town Centre, it gave us an extra armoury to be able to control additional licences, additional hours, and to look at the cumulative impact of those premises. Whether that's still valid, we could perhaps say at the moment that we've controlled those premises. We are at virtually a capacity where there aren't much more that could be extended or applied for. So that might be something that we want to revisit and either remove or continue if we've got the data to back that up. There's bits and pieces in there, that adult entertainment provisions that have changed during the provision of the policy. So there'll be some legislation updates. Things like temporary events, change of number, change of amount. So there's those kind of general areas that we will obviously look to. But if there's anything that you identify within the policy that you think is something of particular interest, somewhere that we could pick up on across the district to benefit us and businesses, then by all means, that's great. What I'll look to do is, if you would be happy to forward me any of those suggestions or provisions that you want to have a look at, I'll try and get those incorporated into an early draft and circulated. But what I'll aim to do, timeline-wise, is to bring that back to you at the March meeting to say, here's draft proposals. We can then look to do a public consultation over the summer. All things hopefully might have settled by then. And then timeline, we can get that agreed by yourselves this time next year and in for the end of 2021. But I'm conscious that that has slipped a while, but we will get onto that as soon as we can, situation allowing. I don't know whether you want to, Sarah, if you want me to come back at the end for any comments on those sort of things, or do it as you're going along, it's up to you.
I don't mind, whatever easiest for you. If you don't mind being interrupted, councillors, if you think of something as we're going along, please do jump in then, as long as Sue doesn't lose her train of thought.
Well, if you actually put your hand up, I'm watching the screen, so I'll field your questions to help Sue out there.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon.
Lovely, thank you. Sexual entertainment venues, that is another policy which is quite dated now. The legislation hasn't particularly changed, and I think it's still pretty much fit for purpose, but that's something else that we would like to revise and update and bring back to you at the same time next year. The biggie for us really is the taxi policy. Now, I know we only revised that pretty much this time last year, so I'm quite confident that it's still fit for purpose. But as you'll see from the papers, the Department of Transport has recently issued some new statutory standards for local authorities. I don't think it's a choice particularly as to whether we adopt them or not. The line from the department is thou shalt put them into your policies unless you've got a really good reason not to. Luckily, the majority of what they are proposing, I do feel that we're ahead of the game a little bit. We've got an awful lot of those things already in our policy. But I think when I had a quick look at the policy, I was going to hope to try and get it complete for you today. But there's around about 70 small revisions to the policy for us to be able to accommodate all of those things. So rather than rush it through, I'll do the same again, make sure that that's an up-to-date draft policy and send it round. As it's not a statutory timeline policy for that one, I'm not sure process-wise at this point whether we can circulate that to all members and get that agreed as an amendment to the policy, or whether we need to do a full consultation. I've asked for some advice on that, and I will let you know as soon as possible. But we will be looking to implement that as soon as we possibly can in 2021, pandemic permitting. What I thought, if it's okay with you, is that I would just pick up on a few of the main bits that are in those standards, partly to reassure you what we are already doing, and partly just to give you a heads up as to what might be coming. So I don't propose to take you through the entire document, but there's just a few little bits that I've highlighted, if that's okay with you. As I say, the comments are that we should be implementing them. It's not really a choice. The document is really useful. It does have quite a lot of background into what's brought around the standards, with a lot of the national issues that have been seen as safeguarding and different issues with different authorities. It does suggest that we will then look to review the policy every 5 years. We do that anyway, so I'm quite confident that that's all right. One of the new areas is a whistleblowing policy. So that is something that we will need to introduce. We've got a very open working relationship between the teams, between yourselves, between different parts of agencies. So I don't think there's an issue with anybody not being able to come forward if they think the process is not being done correctly. But it would be good to have that documented as a formal policy. Mirroring our policies with local authorities next to us. We've got a liaison group, and we work really closely with the different neighbouring agencies and authorities. So hopefully we are going to be able to mirror quite closely, so that makes cross-border enforcement a bit easier. One of the issues that we will have, which may well involve members in due course, is that the suggestion is that once we've changed the licensing policy to accommodate the standards, we should then carry out a review of the licences that we've already issued. I don't think it's the intention to then revoke anybody who would fall outside the policy, because each case would need to be taken on its merit. And I'm quite confident that we've already got a robust criminal convictions policy. We do operate a fairly good 3 strikes and you're out rule for sort of minor misdemeanours, and we tend to bring them before yourselves as often as we can if we think that's appropriate. But that will be a piece of work that we will undertake, is to make sure that anybody that we consider would have not met the policy, we will have a good look at and bring any back to yourselves that we might need to. Safeguarding, that's one of the issues that a lot of authorities nationally haven't yet introduced a safeguarding awareness for their driver applicants. We have done that already. As you know, Jeff Booker, one of our licensing officers, is 30 years ex-police, very high experience in various aspects of safeguarding and units that he worked in prior to. And he's been delivering a really successful face-to-face safeguarding course for all new applicants in-house. We're conscious at the moment that in-house is not possible. We're not still accepting new applications in line with our other neighbours, because we just don't feel confident at the moment that we could do the background check. Safeguarding sessions, there is a possibility that we could perhaps move online with those. There are providers, Bernardo's, those kind of agencies, Blue Lamp Trust, that could help us out with those in the interim. But it's a really good session that Jeff delivers, and I think it would be nice for us to keep that in-house and make it a local issue. And I'd invite members as well, if and when we've got that set up, if any of you wish to attend that just for your own reference, then it is a really good session to come to. Disclosure barring service checks. This is one of the biggest impacts that this will have on the processes that we do and the policy. At the moment, we do obviously background checks on all new applicants, and at the moment we do a DBS check on application, and we repeat that, a fully enhanced one with barring lists, every 3 years for all those drivers. The new standards will require us to get them all to sign up to the update service, which means we can check them at any time we wish to throughout the duration of their licence. But the suggestion also is that we will then check every driver every 6 months, not every 3 years. And into that mix, we will add a background basic police check for any vehicle proprietors, any operators, any staff that are taking bookings, dispatch operators. It's quite a high level of background checking, and I think that's as a result of some of the high profile cases where perhaps it wasn't in depth enough just to check the driver. There could be quite a lot of criminality in amongst the vehicles.
Stuart McCullen has a question.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
thank
Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just that's already. I understand why they're tightening the policy, but what sort of implication is there for the resourcing of the teams for this? Because that sounds like that's going to be quite a lot of additional work. I mean, it sounds it's worthy work, it's necessary work, and you're right. You allude to some high profile cases, and I understand why the law was tightened. I'm not arguing against that, but there's clearly going to be an impact on resources here, isn't there?
An absolutely massive one, Councillor. Yes, indeed. We, at the moment, we are our own umbrella body, which means that all the officers are able to sign off and send off DBS checks and do that part of the process. That's manageable in-house at the moment with drivers every 3 years. It's around about 200 checks a year, which is manageable. The new system will pretty much see us leap up to around about 1,500 to 2,000 a year. And at that point, we're not going to have any option but, I think, to sign up with an online provider. We do have, obviously, the Agilisys contract. We have some business support in the background, but that contract will not be able to support that level of checks and updates that we would need to do. It's going to be a full-time job if we do it in the current process. But yes, you're right, there is a resource implication with that. There's also a cost implication, because obviously we need to make sure that we balance our profit and loss, in effect. Whatever it costs to run the service, we then have to pass on to the drivers, vehicles, operators the following years. So if there's a big jump in the cost of that, that's going to have an implication for licence fees. So we'll be costing quite carefully to see if we can get that resource outsourced to a better online system, and then avoid perhaps the knock-on effect with the fees.
All right, sorry, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, because obviously taxis aren't doing probably terribly well at the moment. If we can avoid passing costs on to them, obviously that would be great, but no, appreciate that. Thank you for your answer.
No problem at all. So yeah, there's a couple of other bits in relation to background checks. There's what's known as an NR3 register. It's a national register where anybody who's had a licence revoked or refused by another authority, authorities are encouraged to sign up to that national database and pre-check, so that we can tell if somebody from up north moves down here and they'd already been revoked for something. We need to know that. We're already signed up to the NR3 database and they're using that currently. So that's something we've got a good tick in the box for, but it is a very useful background tool.
Sorry, Sue, how many, sorry to interrupt. How many other local authorities have signed up to that? How national is it?
I think from the last conference that we went to, it's around about 50-50, but increasing. So I think it was probably worth getting in early so that we already know what we're doing. But yeah, I think it's about 50-50.
Thank you.
Decision making. There's a section in there around who should actually make decisions. I think we're ahead of the game again there, because as councillors, you've all had your training initially before you sat on the panel. That can be refreshed, and I can give you any sort of input you need ongoing as things change. As I say, you're more than welcome to attend the safeguarding session so that you're aware of what they get as a background. Locally, we have got a delegation of power so that if by any chance a driver is convicted or found as a public safety issue, we need to suspend or revoke their licence immediately, I can do that and then escalate to yourselves for a more permanent decision. So that is within our remit already. But I would say the most important thing out of it that I picked up is the fit and proper test, because there's not really a definition of fit and proper, and we've all struggled with that for years. But I think incorporating what the standards say as part of our overarching message for the policy would be that without any prejudice, based on the information before you, would you allow a person for whom you care, regardless of their condition, to travel alone in a vehicle driven by this person any time of day or night? And the overarching answer is, if the answer is no, they don't get a licence. That's the starting point. And I think nationally, that's where everyone needs to be. It is a very trusted employment, really, to be able to put a vulnerable person with someone who can then lock them in a car and drive them away. We need to be absolutely sure, which I think is why, if you may disagree economically, but we've taken the decision to maintain the fleet that we currently have, vehicles, drivers and operators, because we're not confident at the moment that we would sufficiently be able to carry out all these background checks. I wouldn't be able to answer that question. So that's our rationale at the moment for holding off on new applications until we can be sure that that's safe. I hope you agree with that sort of approach at the moment.
Just to interrupt there, it's interesting that the words regardless of their condition have been added to that fit and proper test, which encompasses a whole range of situations. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think there was anything else particular on there other than to say things like CCTV in vehicles. There's a section that covers that. We've decided in our last policy not to make that mandatory. There is the permission to have it should they wish to have it, but that might be something in the future if we think that's appropriate. We can move towards more mandatory. Stretch limos have been identified as an issue of non-licensing across the country, where children are put in there to go to their prom and nobody really knows who the driver is or the state of the vehicle. We've already included stretch limousines in our current policy, so we have a set of conditions. We do get them tested and the driver does need to be licensed, albeit they don't put plates on the vehicles. So that's something we've already done. Operator licensing, that is an area of concern, and I can see why they would bring these new standards in. It's all very well having a self-employed driver that's checked out. It's all very well having a vehicle that's been tested and meets an MOT and all the compliance standards. But if you have an operator with office staff who you don't know who they are in quite a position there to be able to direct vehicles. They can do all sorts of things that are perhaps not monitored quite as closely as they could be. So to add registers on there, background checks for the office staff. At the moment, obviously, the operators are conditioned by us to keep details of all the passengers, what time they're picked up, where they go. But to actually add the name of the individual that took the booking and the person that dispatched the vehicle might enable operators and others looking into it to just identify any patterns that might be hidden to us. PCV drivers, it's something I hadn't really thought about. But if there's a large operator that uses passenger service vehicles, big mobility minibuses that are over 8 seats, they're not licensed by us. They fall under the DVSA regime and their operator licenses are dealt with completely differently. Now, at the moment, there isn't anything to prevent an operator responding by a contract, for instance, of home to school transport, by saying we'll use that vehicle because we don't have one of your licensed vehicles available at the moment. Now, those individuals, whilst I'm sure they're absolutely fine, they're not vetted, they're not DBS checked, and those vehicles are not subject to the same inspection that we would like to see them. So all it's saying here is the attention must be drawn for the people if they are booking, and if it's responded to with passenger service vehicle or a different one to what you would expect to be under our regime, the booking client must be made aware of that so they can make their own judgment. And I think, apart from little bits on enforcement, the convictions policy, we've got a very robust one at the moment. It does follow through quite in line with what's being suggested in the standards, but I will make sure that they mirror the timescales, length of time since previous convictions, the number of times you can be convicted before considered. All of those things will be updated into the next part of that criminal convictions policy. And I think that's it. Apart from, we're not very good at promoting what a safe vehicle is. So the standards have also said it would be nice for us to be able to give some guidance for passengers. So there is an element there of publicity. We can say, this is what a licensed taxi looks like. You're perfectly entitled to ask these questions. If you're not happy, this is how you report it. And some general guidance for passengers. So that is something that we will address as well. So I hope that's okay for a whistle stop, but if there's anything else.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sarah, hang on. Sarah, you had something?
Yeah, just a quick point. I know that previous training that we've gone on, James Button, who is a kind of a lead voice in taxi licensing and law, he was suggesting that any conviction would be a bar to holding a taxi license. This document hasn't gone as far as that, has it? We're still looking at individual merits. We're still looking at anyone who has a conviction coming to a committee given a fair and impartial consideration of their application despite having convictions. So it's not going as far as he would have suggested.
Yeah, so I remember we granted a license to someone that had a conviction way back, and we did it on merit. He came across as being very genuine. He was definitely ashamed of his past, and I think he broke into tears virtually when we said we were going to give him a license because he wasn't expecting it. But before I open up to questions, I've read this document and it's well worth reading because, as Sue quite rightly says, we're ahead of the game on most of it, fortunately. She's, her department is really, we're doing nearly everything in there, but there are one or two things that we need to add, I guess. But the fact that we are ahead of the game makes you wonder what other licensing authorities are doing, that this thing has to be put out there in the first place. It does make interesting reading when you look at the vulnerability of people in some licensing authorities where it isn't being checked properly. And it would only need one incident within our licensing authority for everybody to then start criticising what we're doing. So it's fair play to Sue's team. She's kept well and truly on top of this. And we don't have to do an awful lot, to be in line with everything they're asking for. So that's my take. It's worth reading. If you've got some time, which I'm sure none of us have. If anybody now has any questions.
Yes, Chairman, you've got Councillor Holland followed by Councillor McQuillan.
Okay, in that case, Nicola.
Hello, thank you very much for the report, Sue. And can I just first of all say thank you to you and your team for the last few months. Well, for your hard work anyway, but for the extra work that you've had the last few months. I just want that on record. It's been amazing what you've been up to. Now, you mentioned the 3 strikes and you're out. Is that convictions, or does that include warnings, anything on record at all?
That includes anything on record at all. Right. We like to give people the benefit of the doubt if they have a minor speeding indiscretion or they got into an argument with a customer and it's a one-off and there's always 2 sides to a story. That's always recorded. There is always a file note. If there's a second occasion, then that will be dealt with in person. Or obviously by telephone at the moment, we would speak to them in person about those situations and advise them that if they get to a third scenario, whatever that may be, they are likely to have their licence reviewed and be in front of yourselves for a review of their permission.
Thank you.
Stuart, then followed by Andy.
Hi, thank you. Apologies to go slightly off topic, but I'm just interested in how COVID regulations and social distancing impacts licensing? I mean, taxis is probably less of an issue, but just a food and drink premises. I mean, if there is a concern that premises aren't adhering to social distancing, is that taken into account in renewal of licenses? And is there a process for that? Because it feels like, notwithstanding the current lockdown, and obviously everything is shut at the moment or will be shutting shortly, that some form of social distancing and some form of COVID precautions are likely to be with us for some time. I'm just curious as to how we manage that within the licensing system.
There's a couple of points there. Taxis being the first one. We were very disappointed to find that taxi drivers weren't covered in the regulations as being required to wear face coverings. It seemed a bit strange, really, to be in what is typically a small enclosed space.
Europe too, yeah.
It just seemed a bit strange. So, I mean, we contacted operators and advised them that it's best practice to get their drivers to wear them, and the majority do, but it's really quite bizarre that they don't have to. So, yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of taxi enforcement stops with the local police as well in the last couple of months, and randomly pulled some over just to make sure they've got cleaning wipes and that they've got masks and that they're taking the precautions that you would expect between passengers. So I think that's fairly compliant. I don't think there's particularly an issue with those at the moment. Licensed premises, we've had a lot of issues. We are a very small team, and initially to try and get that into place and give all those premises the advice and get round to those that weren't quite following it was a major task. And that continues to be the majority of the work for the team at the moment. We're trying to do business as usual, but and I think, unfortunately, not to blame the public and pass it on, but there is a certain element of selfishness and personal responsibility. Now, those premises can have a QR code, they can have the face covering, sanitizer, one-way systems, all of those things, but that is reliant on the general public having the common sense to adhere to that. And with the best will in the world, some premises can't adhere. They just can't make people adhere to it. I would say that as a district, listening to some of the national sort of forums that are going on at the moment, we've been really lucky. Our licensed premises have been really compliant. We've had one or two that we've come close with, but on the whole, we've got probably around about 900 licensed premises, and I think we could probably count on one hand those that we've had to visit more than once to try and get some compliance. So they are all being really good, and it's just a very difficult environment for them, and they'll have the same again. They'll close down again now for a month. A lot of the staff will not be there when they come back. They'll have to do retraining, deep cleansing. It's just quite endless for them. So, yeah, I mean, we've got regulations that cover the COVID side of things. So we're all authorised to issue FPNs if we need to against individual premises. We're working really closely with the police, and they are really supportive. And if we're not available, they will go and visit a premise because they have equal powers to us in that respect. But what we're trying to do is escalate it through the licensing process as well, because we've still got our traffic light system where we assign points, make prizes. So if you've come to our attention a few times, you're going to be on that list. And that's worked quite well even through this process as well, for the agencies to be able to say, well, actually, they're not being very good with us. They're not being very good here. And we can escalate them up and focus our resource on that. And ultimately for them, then that means an action plan, and ultimately escalation through to a licence review if they don't comply. So we've got a couple of strings to the bow, if that answers the question.
Thanks, Sue. Is that it, Stuart, for you? You answered.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really useful to understand how it's working. Thank you.
Andy, you have a question, then Ian, after that, Ian Parker.
Yeah, Sue, over the next 5 to 10 years, do you anticipate taxi drivers switching to electric vehicles? Because, as you know, petrol and diesel are going to be phased out 10, 15 years.
Yes, I do. We faced a bit of an issue, as you know, last time with the revision of our policy, that different areas nationally have got different sort of fleet. And traditionally, we had quite an elderly, large private hire fleet, as opposed to hackney trade, which tends to have newer, more sort of up-to-date vehicles as they progress. And for us to move immediately from old to new and electric is a real step. So we've tried to do it this time by cutting down the maximum age that we'll take on. We're working with some of the transport team that I know there's funding available for electric points and electric incentives. So that's something that we will hopefully be able to incorporate and offer to some of the drivers as they approach the end of the vehicle, to try and make it more cost effective for them to have an electric vehicle than it would be just to replace with another elderly diesel petrol vehicle. So it's early days for us because, as I say, that fleet is one that is quite expensive to actually upgrade, with electric vehicles being as they are.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Ian Parker, and then I think Nicola has another question after that.
Thank you.
Ian.
Yeah, thank you. The document gives reference to county lines exploitation. Is there much evidence of that locally?
Unfortunately, yes, there is. Seaside towns traditionally tend to be, because we've got sort of good rail links with London, Birmingham, Liverpool, those sort of places, there is quite a tendency for that to spread out into localised coastal areas. Hence the reason that it's a county line. I guess it goes back to that. There is quite active county lines locally. The police struggle with that side of things. I know they're working very hard on that. We've incorporated county lines training into the safeguarding awareness, because particularly taxis, they're not noticeable. So it's really easy for you to have a look out the window in the evening and think, oh, taxi, and not give it another thought. Is there a passenger actually in it? What are they delivering? Are they there regularly? Is that house subject to strange comings and goings? There's an awareness that needs to be built up in that aspect. And I think the drivers themselves are encouraged, if they're sent regularly to deliver packages and they're not an Amazon driver, it might be something that they wish to bring to our attention. They're all given a little card with contact numbers and details on so that they can report through any issues.
And do they actually do that, Sue?
Not very many do directly to us. The police have had reports through to them. I think there's still an element of, should I report it to licensing? Is that not a police matter? And we try to reassure them that we've got really close links with them, and we're not there to be judge and jury. We're there to pass on that intelligence, and it doesn't matter how it comes through, whether it's to us or the police. But it's just encouraging them to get to that stage where, I think at the moment, probably if I was to be cynical, I would say any journey for them that is an income is a journey with some income, and they may be less likely in this situation, particularly in the lockdown. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, thank you very much.
Nicola, you had another question, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mike. With regard to what you were just saying, I think it's to Stuart, about the problem with personal responsibility, and the problem with, the license holders can do everything they possibly can, but if people won't take personal responsibility, then But at the same time, you've actually found that you've had very little trouble, and once people have been spoken to, how is it you said you've used education and encouragement before enforcement, and you've not had to issue any fines, any formal fines. Is there any way that we can get this out into the public so that people can feel like they're being praised and thanked for all that they're doing, because then they'll continue doing it, and it might remind those that aren't doing it what they should be doing, something in the Times or something like that, just a little bit about, more about personal responsibility, and please take it from yourself when you've had a couple of pints to remember to social distance, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Any chance?
Yeah. I will have a chat with the communications team and see if we can get some bits and pieces out, even if it's snippets of success. Then, as you say, that's something to build on.
It's probably worth as well, along the lines that at the moment we're not inclined, we haven't made a final decision to put marshals on the streets, and that could go hand in glove with that release, that we won't be putting them out there, because we're finding that in the main people do what they're supposed to do and praise them for it, and what you do then is you praise the majority, who then frown upon the small minority and make it uncomfortable for them just by the occasional glare. So I have no more questions coming up. In In which case, if that's the case, then if there's no urgent business, Sarah, anybody?
Just a few other little bits off the report that I'd like to just touch on.
Oh, sorry, okay. Sue. I thought that was finished. You carry on.
No, that's okay. I don't want to bore you all into submission, but I just wanted to highlight another few little bits on there, really. Most of it being, well, thank you to Councillor Holland as well for the kind words. I would just like to reiterate that I am really proud of my team. They have worked tirelessly, extra hours, they've done evening shifts, they've really accommodated as best they can to try and support the businesses and to try and keep the environment safe as we move forward. So I would just like to document as well that I'm really proud of the way that they've done that. One of the biggies that they've also faced is obviously some of the national legislation has overridden our local policy. So things like the street cafes, where we've been encouraged to introduce them really quickly. They've worked really well. A lot of businesses have been able to use outside areas that they wouldn't normally be able to use in their sort of road closures and things like that. So that's a success. The downside of that is that a lot of those regimes will then attract capped fees. And for us as a local authority, we base all the licensing regimes on cost recovery. And there is going to be an element to highlight this year that with premises closing, turnover not being what it is, no new drivers that we can take on, the existing street cafe regime being overridden, there is a financial element to consider. It's national, it's nothing we can affect locally, but it's just something for us to be aware of moving forward, particularly if we're going into an area where we need more resource and we'll have less cost recovery to actually pay for that. So it's just something to be aware of, really. That's probably pretty much it. Thanks to all my team and the other regulatory services, because we've worked really closely with the food team, trading standards, environmental protection, because obviously noise complaints go up during lockdown. Food businesses struggle to maintain their standards. So we've worked across regulatory services really closely. So a thank you to them and to all the other agencies, police, fire, whoever else we've worked with, because it has been a team effort. I don't think we're out of the woods yet, but yeah, we're proud of our networking, put it that way.
So just as outgoing chair and having been involved with you for the past 18 months and your team, I would like to reiterate, I found you incredibly hardworking, all of you, and professional. You've taken on everything that comes along. You've taken on the whole of COVID and just kept smiling and kept working hard. You've had budgets to contend with and will have going forward. But as a team, you've been exemplary, and I'm sure you will be for the future. And those aren't hollow words from me. They're actually what I have found over the last 18 months of being involved. So thank you to you and all your teams.
Yeah, well done.
Now, if there's no urgent business.
No, Chair, I have none listed. Hazel, do you have any listed urgent business?
No, nothing, Chairman, from me.
Thank you, Chairman.
In which case, I shall hand over for the next meeting to Robert, and I will declare this meeting closed.
Lovely. Thank you very much.